So I started off my professional career as an actor,
Wow.
playing in movies, theatre productions, TV series, all those types of things. Yeah, that's where it got started. Got into it with my wonderful parents. My mother is uh, massive creative at heart. She's a performer. So we've been acting since the age of 4, actually having whole family theatre productions because that's my dad just supporting her and pushing us all into the direction that we want to go. So yeah, that's where it all started.
I'm interested to hear a little bit because, one of the things I believe and one of the reasons why I started this entire thing is I'm convinced that there's no lesson that is wasted. And so are there any lessons that you learned or things that you picked up along the way as an actor, which you find yourself still using now professionally or personally?
Yes, I think obviously as a 10, 11-year-old, you don't realize their lessons. But I do think some of the things that I learned was to make your voice heard, but to say things in a way that doesn't disregard everyone else's experiences. So it's all about, saying your piece, but also, just acknowledging everyone else's input and all the effort that went into actually creating something. So that's another thing. Teamwork, collaboration. I mean, if you're on a film set, the actors they're like 5% of the people actually involved with all the behind scenes work. So you realize how much hard work it takes to create something that's excellent.
Yeah. But that's very cool. And I think, it's interesting and I'd love to hear because I think for many young people around that age, like being an actor is one of the things that they dream about and they wish for in the dark of the night. But it would be interesting, like, so, had you found your calling? Like, I mean, now that we know what you do now, it's clear that you've changed a little bit of direction, but at what point did things sort of start to shift?
So I believe that us as humans don't just have one calling. We have so many different facets to us. And that's definitely being expressed a lot more these days. People are having multiple careers throughout their life, multiple passions, multiple things you can chase. Whether you monetize them or not, that's your own agenda. So it definitely is one of my callings. I really enjoy acting. I enjoyed it a lot. It was an incredible experience. But as I grew a bit older, around 13, 14, that's until when the acting career actually lasts, so it wasn't too long, I discovered another passion, or actually started expressing that passion a bit more. And that was, in essence, design and how people and technology talk to each other. That's as simple as it is.
Yeah. Okay, that's quite a shift from being on the big screen to wanting to be behind the computer. And I mean, when I think back to when I was around 11, 12, 13, 14, like that age range, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And it sounds to me at least that you at least had found that you something was drawing you in this specific perspective. Now, would you say that it was more the aesthetic side of things that drew you? Was it more like the technology and its potential? Like, what aspect of that was drawing your interest?
Multiple. I can't specify one thing, but it's very much the technology side is where it started, being passionate about technology, wanting to make a difference in that space specifically. And it's very future focused. So I thought a lot about what will we be doing in the future versus now. And I found myself constantly redesigning things without even knowing it. And it wasn't focused on one specific thing. It wasn't just an interface or just, until matric, I would finish my test as soon as possible. And then in the time remaining, because you had to stay seated, I would turn it around and use the extra papers to design out phones. I was designing phones the whole time. I don't know why. I would quickly tear it up and take it with me. So things like that, just constantly a design mind. Even when I was very little, playing with little cars, it wasn't just the car. It was the car, and it could have this feature and could do this thing. So I would constantly be taking things and thinking, how can they be improved? So I think that might be the essence of it, is improvement.
So how do you actually get into the space? I mean, it's one thing to be interested and to be drawing things on the back of your exams. Like, how did you take that step into actually being trained in this domain? How did that look for you?
It started off with me wondering what kind of job could someone, because I wasn't aware of these kinds of jobs. So I'm like, okay, I can become an architect, or I can, I don't know, all those general job directions. And I started thinking, where do I want to work? And at that point in time, I wanted to work for an innovative company. So I'm like, Apple, Google, one of those massive tech companies. That's where you make a difference, right? So I was looking through their job listings at the age of 14. And I came across this job listing, reading the description, and it was on Apple's website, and it was for something called a human interface designer. And when I read this description, it's almost like something awakens inside of you, because it just described exactly what I want to be doing. And I've never heard of that before. I didn't know it was possible, but it excited me so much. And then when it came time to start looking for what's next, what university to go study at, what degree to go get, we found one that was exactly that. And it was this interaction design degree at the Open Window, right? And at 16, I went to their open day. I put their posters up on my wall, and they were there. I looked at those posters every day until I graduated.
Oh, my word.
Because I was so excited to be doing that. So, somehow I found that flame at a very young age, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. And, taking a little bit of a step back from our conversation and thinking about education in general, the idea of people going out to explore new things, to be able, because I think, until you kind of go and search on Google for this job title or come across it, however it may have happened for you, until you actually see the thing that you like, you don't know that you like it.
Exactly.
And I think it's so amazing to hear that you had the opportunity to do that when you were 16 and set that goal early. I mean, when I think about myself, I was applying for things and after final exams were over, which is not the best way to go about things for the kids out there watching. You kind of want to maybe get your plan at least roughly outlined beforehand. So it sounds like you did that. You had the opportunity to sort of find something that was pushing you. Just out of curiosity, would you say your goal to go and eventually go and study at Open Window at all motivated you when you were studying beforehand? Like to work harder, to study more, or were you kind of like, let's just get there?
No, I've always been a people pleaser, which is something I'm recovering from currently. And I am the oldest, so I have two younger sisters. So there is that eldest child syndrome of wanting to please everyone. So I worked hard in school. But I won't say there was a specific subject or something that was my passion. So it was a bit arduous to get through it. But I worked hard, just with the belief that if you work hard, you'll get what you need. But obviously, a lot of that has been shattered after graduating university, realizing it's actually a lot more about the people that you surround yourself with and your social skills.
Very, very true, and unfortunately so for some. It is good for me because I like talking to people.
Perfect.
But okay, so tell me a little bit about this program. So you studied development, if I'm not mistaken, at Open Window.
Yes.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what the program looked like and your experience in it? Would you say that it was what you expected? Was all the excitement and sort of positive emotion around it? Did it live up to your expectation? Was it not so much what you were expecting? Like, looking back on it, what's your perspective?
It wasn't exactly what I expected, but it opened my eyes to so much more, and it gave me a foundational knowledge of tech and how tech is built. So when I was first here, we still had the option to pivot and to choose a major. So I decided to not major in purely design, but actually major in development. So Open Windows development course was a lot more focused on front-end development, full stack, so being able to do everything from back-end to front-end. And I've always been a lot more interested in the front-end side, so that's why I gravitated towards. And I thought, let's get this foundational knowledge in place, and let's actually have a technical understanding of things. And this was the perfect place to sort of learn that, as well as explore the interface side of things. So in my actual degree, it wasn't focused on interaction design primarily. It was focused on building software. So I essentially built that interaction design skill later. My post-grad, I majored in interaction design, and then going back teaching there. But we're running off now.
A little bit. Well, I would like to hear a little bit about that. So you said like the degree wasn't exactly what you expected, but it maybe opened your eyes up to a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then you said like once you hit postgraduate, you started to specialize a little bit more. Yeah. And I almost would like you to tie back in this idea of looking at things and seeing how they can be better. Yes. Because I had the pleasure of reading your honors paper and was absolutely floored by it. It was such a great piece. And, you know, especially because I'm pretty into gaming, especially RPG games. There was some aspects of what you wrote about in your paper that were like, I've been seeing and experiencing this all the time. I just hadn't realized. So I'd love it if you could maybe just outline a little bit, maybe first entering the space shifting from development to interaction design. What was that shift conceptually in the type of work that you were engaging with? And then maybe also share a little bit about your honors paper.
Yes. So after graduating, I started to work as a software developer at a company. And it's in that year, so it was 2020, in that year when I did my honors as well. So I was studying and working simultaneously. And I think because my passion always lied with design, I'm like, okay, we're going to be doing something in design for the postgrad. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but actually I knew exactly what it meant, it had to be, right? And it's something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. So going back to school years, I would not understand why is the way we interact with technology like a phone or computer, why is it restricted to this little square you have in your hand? Why can't, you know, an interface be floating in front of me, right? Seeing holograms in movies, all those things. So I would walk back from school, be gesturing in the air, pretending like there's holograms in front of me. So it just makes sense to actually do the honors paper on spatial computing, and actually we'll define that in a sec, but actually designing for the 3D world, interfaces in our 3D world, software that engage with the space around us instead of being contained to a rectangle. It just always seemed to make sense to me that this was going to be the next evolution of the way we use technology. And it's happening, finally.
You know, I think there's much to talk about there, and we'll get to the spatial computing aspect just now. But maybe if you can just clarify for me in the timeline, because previously you'd mentioned to me that you were also a lecturer. So yes. Were you lecturing at this point in time? Did that come later? Was it before?
Yeah. So talking about a lot of career paths, I've explored a lot of them. So it started off with studying. Then I went to work full-time as a software developer while doing my honors in 2020. And then in 2021, I lectured full-time at the Open Window. So in order for me to be able to lecture, I needed to have that honors.
All right. So
that wasn't the goal. I didn't know that was what I wanted to do. I just started helping them out. And then there was a job posting, and it just made sense, especially to go lecture in interaction design. Although I didn't major in it, there was a lot that I already understood and wanted to learn more about. So I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity to learn more is by teaching and actually developing content. So 2021, I lectured at Open Window.
Wonderful. So I think we'll maybe circle back to that just now. So with this paper, the honors paper that you wrote, you were introducing the idea of spatial computing. And, you know, maybe at that time, especially before you started writing, you might have thought about it just as computers in 3D. But maybe now that the language is actually starting to be used a little bit more and is entering the public domain. Can you share a little bit with us from your perspective how you would define spatial computing and what differentiates it from the typical computing we see on the day-to-day?
Yes. So I always like to compare spatial computing to what it was like moving from desktop-based to mobile, right? This mobile revolution, when we started having technology that we could hold in our hands, that was, smaller form factor, carry around with us, wireless connectivity, that was a computing revolution, right? The mobile computing revolution. So spatial computing is very much the next step towards that, and it actually encapsulates a lot, right?
Okay.
So things that fit into spatial computing are terms we all know, things like VR, virtual reality, augmented reality fits in there, and then there are other terms like Microsoft's mixed reality and XR. All of those things are sort of fit inside of spatial computing. But,
Okay.
yeah, at its simplest form, it's essentially if we allow computers to know what our environment is, how does that change the way we interact with them, right? So what comes into play is not just this little rectangle in front of us, but the physical space that we're in. So the device is aware of the physical space, and then we're bringing the technology into the space with us.
That's amazing, and I think it sets a good stage for us because, when you look at a screen, you're really working in 2 dimensions, and it's essentially like one extremely long line of information. But I'm assuming 3D obviously adds a couple of aspects that we haven't necessarily thought about, which then means that the way that you display information, I'm assuming, is going to be really different. And this is one of the ideas you explored pretty well, I think, in your paper. So can you share a little bit about how a designer might think a little bit differently about constructing an interface or just generally displaying information in this third dimension?
Of course, yeah. So luckily, all of our existing design principles still apply in a 3D environment. That was what I was trying to understand, and they do. But now there's new considerations. So firstly, we live in a 3D world. So it just makes sense to have our technology follow us into that, right? But if we introduce a physical environment, there's a few things that change. So the first thing is the environment is constantly changing. We're not limited to a fixed screen size. The world is your canvas, right? So you essentially have endless space to display information, to have interaction with the computer. So with this boundless space, we need to define where is information getting displayed, right? So whereas on a flat interface, information is in a fixed place, with spatial computing, there's sort of these different levels to displaying information. So we start off with the simplest one, which is screen fixed, right? And this is information that's literally fixed in front of your eyes. So I think we can talk a bit about the technology, the hardware technology, but if you're wearing a headset and you have something and you move your head, then it just follows your head exactly how it moves, right? Or if you're on a phone with an augmented reality experience, it's the controls on the screen. The second level is it goes into your environment, but it's attached to you. So it's user attached or user fixed interface control. So if you are creating a painting on artwork in 3D in this environment, if you look at your hand and you have the brushes appearing on your fingertips, for example, you can select one. That would be fixed to you as a person. So when you move around, the things move with you. And then finally, we have the world fixed. And these are elements that are fixed to certain points in your physical space. So if I grab a window and I move it on top of that table, I walk around, it's still over there, for example.
Okay. That's very cool. And, I think for especially if you don't play games, some of these might sound a little bit abstract. If you haven't used a VR device before, it might seem a little bit strange. But I think there are real world things that somewhat mimic that. When you're talking about the on-screen information that you might have, the thing that comes to mind is like a scope for a gun, because regardless of where you look, your crosshairs are always in the same spot. And so it's that kind of a concept. And then like body fixed thing. I mean, a watch is a strange example, but it's like
Exactly.
you want your watch to be with you wherever you go, so that regardless of where you are when you move your arm, you've got the time.
Exactly.
And so there are almost these physical things in the world that represent these different forms of information. And maybe for us as designers, there's something to take away from that. So, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, but what would you say as a designer entering the 3D space?
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the things that you should first consider or think about if you want to go into the space of working in 3D?
Yes.
Or even learn more?
Yeah, I think the first thing to know as a designer is what's your appetite for learning softwares, because we have different kinds of softwares. Usually 3D had a very high barrier to entry. You needed to know hardcore 3D modeling software. You need to know Blender, Maya. But now we have some newer technologies that, like Spline, for example, there's a web-based approach that makes it super easy to do it. So you need to know where am I playing? I like to play in the easiest to use tools because that's the most accessible, right? And that's what you want to be teaching people. Secondly, you need to know what you're trying to achieve. Like, why is 3D necessary for this specific context? Is it just to look cool? Does it add something to the user? So we can talk a bit about, what some of the benefits are with doing 3D design. And then you need to start understanding depth, right? How depth works.
Okay.
It's very different to adding a shadow to a button, right? Things are physically close or far away from you. You can't have an information or warning modal pop up in front of someone's face. They're going to get a physical fright because there's something physically in front of them, right? So those considerations are extremely important to know.
Yeah. I think it's such an exciting space and also so unexplored that I think there are a lot of designers who would be well served by exploring it. But like them, you had to wait a little bit. You write this amazing research paper, you do reasonably well, and it's like, okay, now I can go into the world and make beautiful 3D things. Except the world is not ready for your beautiful 3D things. So, we know that you didn't get to immediately dive into games or all of those 3D environments. So where did you actually go once you've managed to finish this honors paper and kind of sort of sign that off, dot the I's and cross the T's? What was the sort of next step on your journey from there?
So firstly, nothing was planned out. Okay, this is not a master plan. It all just happened. But so I've been working with an incredible human being, and she's always also my best friend, and we've been working together for quite a while, Sabia. And we started out working together when I was still in university in second year. So she has a company called Jack Studios, and they do some incredible product design work. But back then, it was still growing, emerging, and I used to work with her alongside studying and working full time. I used to do this as well. And it was sort of a moonlighting gig, getting to know how to manage clients, how to work with projects. It started out in development and switched over to design. And after I completed my year of lecturing at the Open Window, I decided it's time to join the team full time at Jack Studios. So, we're a very small team, 4 or 5 people. And we worked with startups, and we're still working with startups to create these incredible digital products. And I do think that it was difficult for us to conceptualize that we'd be able to offer only interaction design and product design and not development to clients. But somehow we got there, and that's essentially what we focused on throughout that time. So I've been working there, many different roles, again, small company, but trying out all aspects, and that taught me so much about product design, about working with founders, startups, companies, and also collaborating, obviously, with other team members, with developers, with external stakeholders.
Yeah.
That's
Amazing. And in another podcast you and I have we had the opportunity to go into some of the work that you did from Weaver to Lulo to many of the the 100 startups that Jack has sort of served over its time. And I think I almost don't want to go too deeply into that, but I'd encourage anyone in the audience listening, if you're interested, definitely go and have a look, because I think you guys can't even necessarily completely appreciate the level of the work that you do at Jack, and there's definitely something to be said about that. And one thing I'd maybe like you to speak a little bit about, because one of the things I'm getting, if I look back at our conversation so far, is you have done a lot of different things, and not just doing different things, doing things that are very different from each other.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, an actor to a designer is worlds apart, like being in 3D versus kind of like, standing in front of stage, needing to do something impromptu is a completely different ballgame. And then also, even within Jack, you've done very much of the design side of things. You've been more client-facing and engaging on the business side of things. And so I get the sense that you've played like a very broad role. Can you talk a little bit about some of the advantages you've experienced from having such a broad sort of experience set and not necessarily just focusing in one space?
Yeah, listen, being able to zoom out and view something from all aspects helps a lot. Seeing the bigger picture always helps to contextualize everything that you do. So I think that's one of the biggest things that it sort of taught me. Not just understanding all aspects of the business or working with, different clients and companies, to managing a design team, to teaching students at different levels, right? And obviously to be the center of attention on stage, receiving all of that. I think it's given me a very neutral view on everyone and all of their roles.
So that's amazing. And maybe one thing I would like you to talk a little bit about, because I think you might say we've almost caught up to today. If we look at it from a chronological perspective,
Yes.
we've covered the acting stage. We talked a little bit about you finding your direction as a professional, doing development and entering into action design, getting into lecturing, and then eventually sort of the work that you've been doing at Jack. So, with all of those different directions in the past, what is the next step? Where is the road taking us now? Because it seems it could take us absolutely anywhere.
And it will. So there's no particular end goal. There's never been, and I don't want there to be.
Yeah.
But there is that driving force and that passion and that guiding light. And for me, that guiding light is very simple. It's what impact can I make on the world that will help us move forward as a society using technology. That's it. Technology needs to be in there, and improvement needs to be in there, and those are the two main pieces, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So going forward, I realized that it would be better for me to not be constrained to a specific company or specific role, but for me to be more flexible, right? To be able to play all these different roles when they need it. So still being a product designer, but being able to fit into a company or work with a team wherever that will be needed. To be able to teach more and to actually get the word out and make sure that we are training the next generation of designers to be able to design for things like spatial computing and whatever will be after that. So it's very much just going where the light takes me.
And I think I'm always a little bit reticent to ask that question, just because I realize, especially because I'm like this as well, is when you're really chasing your dream, you don't know where it's going to take you. Because if you know where it's going to take you, you're not chasing your dream. You're chasing the thing that you know.
Yep.
If you really are chasing your dream, you're essentially stepping out into the unknown. And I think there's really something to be said for you making that decision. And I think especially after COVID and all of the things that we're realizing about the ways of work, and the fact that there are different ways of working, I think more and more we will need people like you who are willing to step outside of certainty, step outside of comfort, step outside the way things used to be done, and try new things. And so I think I am going to wish you luck on this journey.
Thank you.
But more than that, I'm going to be walking this journey with you.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
I think that is maybe the exciting thing that I would like to share with everyone. And if you'd like to, you can also share a little bit about what you'd like to achieve. But, taking a second to talk a little bit about what CampFire does and what CampFire is trying to achieve. And why I wanted to talk to you is, at its base, what we're trying to do is make specific skills, especially emerging skills that are in demand, available without having to go to a large institution that's going to ask you for 50, 80, 100,000 rand, and you come out not sure that you can get a job.
Yeah.
Like that to me is a tragedy, both to the school and to the student. And I think in 2023, I got to really see that this was something that was possible, that you would bring to get people together around a specific topic, who have got passion, who are interested, and who are willing to work. And everything else in an education system is fluff. It's really a person who has knowledge and is willing to do the work to teach, and a group who has a desire to learn and is willing to do the work to understand it. And I think what I've seen in you that kind of immediately got me interested in collaborating, one is the fact that you've tried all of these different things. And second is that even with all of that that experience and past sort of all of that in your past, you're not scared to go into a new domain.
No.
And I absolutely love that. Especially because like AI, 3D, all of these things are like on the cusp, they're on the brink, and we can't afford to not understand them.
Especially in South Africa, like we're not behind, right? Everyone has this concept that we're behind in the tech space, and we simply aren't, right? And because everything is so connected, we work with people over the world. We get access to the latest technologies immediately. So it's in a place like this where a lot of the innovation will come to fruition way sooner than in much larger established countries. Although that's
Yes.
that's not many people's opinion, but yeah.
True, but the truth will make itself known. But I think this is probably going to be the closing side of this. So maybe to close, one thing I would like you to maybe share a little bit about. You and I are going to share a little bit more about the collaboration that you and I are doing together, but maybe talking directly to the designer who is kind of like junior stage, kind of finding their feet. They've found their first job and are trying to figure out where to go next. What either advice or learning from your own experience would you leave in trying to chart your way forward as a designer, given what's happening in the world as well as what's happening in our industry?
Okay, let me address them on this camera directly.
Please.
Don't get bogged down by your current context. So if you're working at a specific company or in a specific setting, don't feel like that's it, right? And the only way for me to move up in this world is to move through the ladders of that specific company or that specific place. I would say do what's right for you in terms of what gives you stability and the level of risk you're willing to take. But don't let that creative flame that that sort of that drove you to design in the first place be limited. Explore other things, go out and try and actually express what you're feeling, because many companies and many places tell us as designers, oh, they're the creative team and the designers, like, ooh, we need to be a specific way with them. Those are the people who's building the world, and they're the people who's designing the next generation of technologies and who's going to be taking us all into the future. So allow yourself to be that way and allow yourself the chaos that comes with it. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. And I think I won't even add to that because I think embracing chaos is the one thing that will serve you well over the next couple of years. Embrace it.
Yeah.
And to you, my dear listeners, it has been a pleasure having you with us. It has been a pleasure recording this very first episode. If anyone is listening on the stream, thank you very much. I 100% appreciate that. But if not, we'll see you next time. We'll get you. We'll get you. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Alfie. Very excited for the journey ahead.